Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
In Dr. Adam Grant's book, Give and Take, he divides the world into three categories, or divides people into three categories. There are givers, there are takers, and there are matchers. And the givers are the people who are predisposed, they're generous people. The takers are the selfish people, and the matchers are the people who are looking to get something in return for whatever they're doing, and hopefully of equal value. It's a fascinating book, and it kind of goes on from there, but it's kind of made me aware of other types of research that's out there. And so I've stumbled on some various research related to selfish people, the takers, according to Dr. Adam Grant. And you wonder about takers, you wonder about people who are selfish and why they're that way. Why? Because when we talk, when I see people in networking, when I see people who are successful at networking, they're the people who are giving. And there's different strategies for giving, and I'll get into that in future episodes. But you wonder why selfish people are that way, knowing that really the generous people are the ones who ultimately become more successful. So I ran across an article, essentially, how can selfish people live with themselves? And that's a question I've always had. It's like, geez, you're pretty stingy. I mean, I don't say this to people. There's no utility in doing that, making somebody feel bad, but we kind of judge people just on whatever it might be. I remember a situation when I worked in public accounting. Somebody was going around and they were raising money. It's a big office. There's lots of people in the office going around raising money for a student's trip or a child's trip to DC or something like that. And I remember that one of the higher ups came bounding out of his office and literally threw $2 down. Or some of the underlings are putting $20 out, and the person who probably makes the most in the office put $2 down, like it was some sort of glorious thing, and we need to have a ticker tape parade because this particular individual gave $2, and they're a stingy person. Certainly in that moment, I can't really judge overall, but how can selfish people continue to be that way? How do they sleep at night, I guess, is really the question. And what the studies are showing is that it really comes down to memory or self-deception. And they don't remember, or they misremember, the things that they did or didn't do. And what there were 5 separate experiments and to test generosity. And these 5 experiments covered 3,190 people. That's a pretty significant number. And what they found is that stingier people tended to recall giving more than they actually had. So when asked, what did you contribute, accounting partner, what did you contribute to Johnny's trip? Oh yeah, I put $50 down. And they're not lying, they're just misremembering. And what it talks about in the study is people were even rewarded for telling the truth. And so it's not that people, how do they live with themselves? How can they sleep at night? They deceive themselves into believing that they're more generous than they are. And I talk about this in my book, The Giving Journal, that people are somewhat um, self-deceptive, and that's, I'll put a link to the Giving Journal in the show notes so you can download it if you want. You get a free copy. You're not going to have to give me an email address. You just download it. But people become they they trick themselves because our minds there's a mechanism, a psychological mechanism that helps maintain a positive view of ourselves. If you notice that we might judge somebody for being late. Oh gosh, they're late. They're late all the time. But then when we're late, we kind of paint it with shades of gray. Yeah, I know I'm late, but this and this and this happened, and that's all excusable. Now, we're not giving them the benefit of whatever the excuses they might have. We're just judging them in black and white. Well, they're late, and we're judging ourselves in shades of gray, and that's essentially our mind really protecting ourselves, and we're certainly biased towards ourselves. And so somebody who is stingier with their money or stingy with respect to their time or whatever it is, they are deceiving themselves, misremembering, if you will. And it's really kind of an interesting explanation as to why stingy, selfish takers are the way they are, and and they don't see it, right? They don't see it. Radio show host Colin Cowherd has a saying. He's a sports talk person. People who don't get it don't get that they don't get it, right? So if you're, somebody who's selfish, they don't see it. They don't understand it. They're not going through the world, the world throughout their day, and saying, "Well, I'm a stingy person. What do I need to compensate?" So you have to wonder, okay, what's happening with stingy people? What's happening with these people who are less generous with their time, less generous with their network, less generous making introductions? And I run into this all the time. I'll have calls with people and do things for people, and then you don't even get a thank you back. Not that I'm expecting a thank you, but they're certainly not interested in reciprocating, and not necessarily even interested in acknowledging what I may or may not have done. And I've talked to other people, and they run into similar people. And you kind of wonder, well, how do these people go through life like this? Well, in their mind, they made an introduction somewhere, and and they kind of hang their hat on that. Hey, look, I did this one thing. I am generous. And then they forget the fact that they didn't do something for Brian or Frank or whoever else. And it's not that I keep score. It's just you kind of notice these things about people. I guess you are keeping score. I don't keep score in the sense that, I'm out to get this person. What I tend to do is I tend to move on, and I tend to surround myself with the people who are more like-minded. It's more fun. It's just really what it comes down to. It just seems to make more sense. And that kind of leads into another article that I stumbled upon that really kind of touched on why do selfish people, why do takers prefer to be with other takers? I get, and conversely, generous people want to be with generous people. I get that. That makes total sense. And I'm not saying I'm totally generous. I try to be helpful. I'm not perfect. I try to make introductions, and I'm attracted to, I want to associate with people who are similar that way. Berta Medina, somebody who comes to mind, Brian Hilliard. There's just lots of people out there that are just really genuinely good people, and you want to help them because they're helping you. And I understand why those birds flock together, but you would think that selfish people would prefer to hang out with generous people, at least for at least for the time being, at least just to get as much as they could and move on. And what the research shows is that selfish people prefer to do business with other selfish people. And to me, that's surprising. And actually, selfish people are quick to punish generosity, and they reward selfishness in other people. Um, and really, what they theorize, what they're discovering is that we use our own behavior as a guide to show how we should interact with others, and so those are the people. If you're selfish, those are the people you seek out. I wonder if it's a situation where people are, and I'm really curious about this, and I don't know that there are any answers out there, but I wonder if it's a situation where the selfish people are, a generous person will make them feel bad, right? So if you're with a generous person, and you go back to my office example, and there are two groups of people. There's the stingy group, and there's the generous group, and the generous group's all putting down, $20 bills to contribute for Johnny's trip, and the stingy group is just putting down single dollars or making excuses not to give it all. You're going to want to be with the stingier people if that's the type of person that you are. And people can be that way for lots of reasons. There are people who do have a scarcity mentality, and they come by a scarcity mentality honestly. They may have grown up without money, and the notion of giving money away, it's neither here nor there, but you would want to. That's why you would want to be with those stingier people. To me, it's fascinating. I've talked on this podcast about how generosity is infectious, and they've found the same thing with respect to selfishness. Is that in various studies, someone being selfish will inspire or nudge even a generous person to become selfish. And I kind of understand that if you think about it, because if you're in a setting and you're a generous person and the people around you are stingy, you have to be careful, because you can quickly be fleeced of time, talent, and treasure if you're giving too much. So I understand that. But when selfish people are selfish, it really kind of inspires other selfish people to essentially say, "Hey, it's okay. The behavior's okay." I don't know that there's any real point to this episode other than the notion that there are, as Dr. Adam Grant has indicated, there are givers, there are takers, selfish people. And there are matchers. These types of people are out there. And once you become aware of those types of giving mindsets, if you will, you start to notice it in other people. I start to notice when people will reach out to me and say, "Hey, if you do this for me, I'll do this for you." Well, that's a matching behavior. I start to notice when people will ask something of me and, "Hey, I want to get you on a call. I want to tell you all about what we have." And that's really kind of a selfish sort of, "Hey, I want your time," generally for me. And a lot of those with those calls, people at the very end will say, "Well, what can I do for you? With the 30 seconds we have left, tell me what I can do for you. Maybe next time we'll talk about that." And the next time never happens. And then there are people you get on calls with where it's like, I just had a call with I mentioned Brian Hilliard. Hey, let's really dig into how we can help one another. And it's a fun call. Let's schedule another one of these. Absolutely. Why not? But you'll start to notice things about people, and you'll start to notice these things in people, and that, selfish people are hanging with selfish people, and generous people are hanging out with generous people, and it's To a degree, you have to be careful hanging out with the wrong people because the selfish people will tend to bring you down. So just some things to think about. Be a giver. I'll put the link to the giving journal in the show notes. You can download it, just a PDF, no cost. But think about the type of person that you are and the type of person that you want to be. My sense is that most of the people listening to this podcast are givers, are generous in some way, shape, or form, mainly because listening to podcasts is really kind of an act of, personal development and wanting to get better for the purpose of helping others. That's just my theory on it. Could be totally wrong. We'll see.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.